Okay, welcome to your PowerPoint 101 video. So this is a crash course just like the Word and Excel 101 videos have been, where I'm going to go through a whole bunch of the buttons and tell you what I find to be commonly useful things and stuff that I just think will save you a lot of time if you're not. Again, as always, not an expert, don't know absolutely everything about this software. I'm sure there's wizards out there who know a lot more than I do, but this is the stuff that I've found super useful to know. So the main two or three things that I use PowerPoint for is making lecture slides or just presentations in general slides, and for making figures to put into reports. To some extent, and I don't do poster presentations as much as I probably used to, but you can also make large posters that get printed on like A0 or A1 pages and large signs and that type of thing in PowerPoint. It's really, really good for that. So I'm actually going to hit escape here and take you out of the presentation mode so that we can have a look at the buttons within PowerPoint. So you normally wouldn't have an animations page open, so I'll close that. So by default, you've got your main slide, well, your slide that you're working on here, and then on the left-hand side, you've got all the slides in your presentation. So my title slide and then the slide that I'm on. Bring you up here to the toolbar. Copy paste, pretty standard. I'm assuming you know what this does by now. The only thing that I will point out that maybe you might find useful is you can actually select entire slides on this left hand side and Control C, Control V, copy paste a whole slide. For reasons that you might have multiple slides where you want to show something slowly evolving, for example, it's super useful. Yeah, go away. You can go new slide and get a new slide, surprisingly enough. Just a default slide, title and some text or whatever. You can come up to here like layout and you can get different styles of slides, like just a blank slide without those text boxes in it. I tend not to use it, not because it's bad, just because I never think about it, and I tend to just, if I want a new slide, um, I'll just delete all the things on it if I want it to be blank by default, but you know, it's a thing, it exists. This is all just stock standard text stuff, right? So exactly the same as it is in Word. The only thing that you do want to be really careful of is what is an appropriate font size. Particularly if you're doing a presentation, you don't necessarily know how big the screen is and how big the room is and how high quality the projector is. How big should you make your text? And that can be really, really difficult to know if you're going into an area that you don't understand particularly well. So I go and scout all of my lecture theatres before I ever start a semester, and I go and put a slide up with progressively smaller text on it, and then I walk around the room and I see how easy it is to read from different places. You're not always going to be able to do that though, so generally go bigger than you think is required, because not only is that better, but it also will force you to use less words on your slide, which most people should be using less words on their slides. So cool. But that can be tricky and hard to know. Dot points, something that you might find useful. Again, these are the same dot points as they are in Word. So there's nothing really interesting here. The only thing that, I'm sure I've mentioned this, but I'll do it again just in case. You can change the level of a dot point. So you can see I've got dot points here and then sub points here. By hitting tab, you move things down a tier in the list. Yeah. I think most people probably know that. What's not so many people know is you can go Shift Tab and you can move things back up a tier in the list. So Tab moves things down and Shift Tab moves them back. So hold Shift, press Tab. Other than that, that's all pretty stock standard stuff. Then we hit drawings. Now, drawings super useful for predominantly making your own figures, which is something that you will definitely do. So part of when I say you'll make your own figures, you'll take photos, you'll put them into PowerPoint and you'll arrange them and you'll save it as a figure. But part of what you'll actually also do is just from scratch, combine a bunch of objects together and make a figure. It might be a schematic diagram, or it could be all sorts of other things. It's certainly not as good for making engineering figures as, say, a proper like CAD design package might be. but it is significantly better than most of the alternatives out there because it does things like gives you these lines to help you make sure things are square and aligned and all that sort of stuff. So you can put in different shapes and you can draw lines and you can copy and you can paste and you can connect things up and do all sorts of cool stuff. And then once you've got a whole bunch of things arranged into an object as you like it, you can come in, you can select them all. You can control G and you can make a group, and now you've just got one single entity that you can move around. And you get a whole bunch of options for different stuff that you might want to make in there. Arrange, super useful. Sending stuff to the front and the back just determines how it's layered up inside of the image. Kind of useful. Grouping and ungrouping is useful. What I find most useful is this: align center, arrange, align, align middle. Now it's in the middle of the page, and I just find that unbelievably useful to be able to do. Actually put stuff dead center of your page. So that's really nice. I don't actually use the drawing window here on the home page that often. I generally end up going insert and start putting my shapes in. I don't know why. It seems like it's an extra click, but it's just what I tend to do by default. This drawing tools is also really nice. Again, a lot of these options were presented on the home page. Shape fill, shape outline, all of that. I don't know, for some reason I find it easier to do in here. So I can come up to one of my objects and I can change its shape fill, so the color on the inside of it, make it blue, and then there's an outline. And sometimes it's a little bit hard to see the outline, but there's an outline around most shapes by default. You can make it no outline if you want. And you can, be black. Change the weight of the outline so you can make it more or less pronounced. Weight's probably more useful though if we wanted to talk about lines. So you can make them fatter, thinner, or you can make them, dots and dashes and center lines and all sorts of different junk. So that's cool. That's all within the drawing tools in here. Same, align and group, all of that's in here too. Oh, this is another really useful thing. I want you to be exactly 10 centimeters wide and exactly 10 centimeters high. Super useful. You don't have to eyeball stuff anymore. You can actually put numbers in things. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, the more gifted of you will be able to make significantly better shapes and drawings and things than I can inside of PowerPoint, but it can be used fairly powerfully. Other than that, we got into the insert tab here. You still get your new slide button here. You'll notice this is actually a common theme in PowerPoint. The buttons are repeated in a whole bunch of different places. So inserting a new slide was on the page before. It's in the home page and it's in the insert page. I don't know why they put it in twice, but they did. Buttons are cheap, I guess. So new slide, all this stuff's pretty stock standard. You can put pictures in, so you can go this way and you can go and find a picture. Insert. There we go. And you can get a picture. Or you can just kind of grab them from wherever they are and drag them in. That also works. So putting pictures in is pretty easy. Most people figure out, actually, I'm going to undo that. Similar to when we clicked on a drawing, we got this extra drawing tools tab. When we click on a picture, we get an extra picture tools tab. It's very similar to the drawing tools that you've got sizes and alignments, and you can crop it to be, I don't need all that blue sky. Blue sky's for losers. Make it bigger, whatever you want to do. So you can do all of that just like you could with a drawing. You can get borders and backgrounds and do weird stuff to it if you want to. It's probably going to be a bit of a common theme for the next couple of menus here is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So in general, in a professional engineering report, yes, you can put in all your figures like this. You probably shouldn't. All right, so that's more or less it for inserting pictures. You can do some things like mess with their color and their contrast and stuff, which can be helpful as well. So after insert, well, we're still on insert, I suppose, shapes. These were the shapes that appeared before in the drawings tab as well, so they're repeated again there. I've never put any of these, never pressed any of those buttons, any of those buttons, any of those buttons text box. I use that all the time. Put in fresh text boxes, super useful. All right, headers, footers, slide numbers. So it's kind of weird. You can put in a header and a footer and a date and a time and a slide number, but if you just click on, if you have nothing else selected and you just click on slide number, it brings up this window and you can tick date and time, slide number, and footer. It's like you kind of didn't need 3 separate buttons, but you got 3 separate buttons anyway, but whatever. You get a date, and that auto updates, right? So tomorrow, if I recorded this tomorrow, that would say the 2nd of the 5th. Slide number and whatever you decided to put in your footer. So that's kind of cool. You can put that in there. You can put equations in. Here's one I prepared earlier, apparently. Just insert an equation. Bam. There you go. Put equations in. Wonderful. Just like you do in Word. It's, I believe, identical to the Word one. So I assume you know how to use that by now. You can also insert symbols. Again, pretty much identical to the Word system. Cool. Okay. Videos. So videos in presentations are one of those things that a lot of the time are much harder than people think they're going to be, and they cause a lot of problems. It's kind of almost an expected thing at like a conference that a video playing when it's supposed to is probably 50-50. So few different ways in which you can embed videos, and I've got a couple embedded in different ways here. I'm just going to do it again for you now though, because it makes more sense. So if you go to embed a video, you get 2 options, online video or video on my PC. So you can go video on my PC and you can go and find a video file that you have and you can put it in. Or you can just, open up. This is where by default it saves all of my screen recordings that I do before I pick the good ones up and move them into here. So this is all of the attempts that I've had at making this already. I can just grab a video, drag it in, dump it in. Now, the thing that's tricky here is this is a 200 meg video file. And is it actually now embedded within the PowerPoint or is it not? If it is embedded within the PowerPoint, I can no longer say email it to anybody because 200 meg video is not getting through email. Or it's just a reference to a file that's hidden somewhere else on my computer. And that way, if I copy this on a USB and go and plug it in to a Lectern PC, does it have access to this video? And there are some slightly different ways of doing this, and you can actually embed it properly and so that it is contained within the file, and you can not, but it constantly causes problems for people. In general, what I would do if I ever had to give a presentation and I did want to embed a video in it, I would normally make a folder and I would have separate to my my PowerPoint presentation, I'd actually put the video file in there with it. So I could exit out of PowerPoint and just open it in whatever other software I needed to. Welcome to your crash course in whatever other software they had available. So that's one option if you've actually got the file. But another probably more common option is to embed online videos. So you can insert a video, online video, and it's a little bit trickier. The correct way to do this that I've found most reliable is you go to something like your YouTube, you go to share your assessment 2 and 3 feedback video that I made for you, and you can just take the link, but when you just take the link, you normally then need to click on the link and it opens up your internet browser and it plays it within the internet browser, which is generally not as good. Generally, what you want to do is go to embed, get this, copy it, and then go back to your presentation and paste it into here and insert it. And now what you're going to see is you actually get this as a video that can play without you ever having to open up the browser. And in the middle of a lecture or something, this is a far, far, far better way to do it. Unless you don't have an internet connection. And then it's terrible. And it turns out that's actually what happened in our very first lecture. I don't know if any of you remember, but lecture 1 of 1500, I had some videos embedded like this that was supposed to play automatically. Turns out the Lectern computer wasn't connected to the internet. And I never considered that the computer wouldn't be connected to the internet. So that's why those videos didn't play. So shame on me, I suppose. Um, so that's embedding videos. There's a little bit to it. If you want to do it, make sure that you set yourself up well to do it well. Cool. I think that's more or less all of that. We'll go to design now. So that, oh, let's just make sure. Yeah, video, audio and screen recording. Okay, so audio is embedded in a similar way if you want to put in audio files for whatever reason. And I didn't know that it had a screen recording option. I probably don't actually need to be using OBS to do a lot of what I'm doing. That's my recording software. But, it's a thing. All right. So design. When you open PowerPoint, it won't look exactly like this. It'll probably look more similar to this. You get a bunch of these default designs that you can pick for your slides as backgrounds and stuff like that. You can pick all this different stuff. Hardwood floors in a house that I'll never be able to afford to own. In general, I would say don't. Or at least do it carefully. If you know what you're doing and you've got some design background behind you and you know how to make stuff that really, really looks good, great, go for it. Even, go and format your own, make a custom background, do as you will. Awesome. If you don't have that level of artistic talent, pick something simple and stick with it, okay? So this is how I just picked this one. It's real simple and I just use it and I never touch any of these types of things. Be aware that these will often carry with them their own formatting for things like fonts and font sizes. So as you change between these, it can really mess up. Whilst that page number is a readable font size, that may not be. So just be careful with them. Again, similar to some of the effects that you could do with your figures, just because you can doesn't mean you should. All right, this is the other super useful button, slide size. And it's not actually useful for when you're doing presentations. When you're doing presentations, don't touch it, leave it alone, because by default, it's the aspect ratio of a projector, which is what you want it to be. But when you're making figures and you want them to be one set size, use this. So come in custom slide size and go, in my report, I'm going to make all of my figures 10 centimeters wide and 15 centimeters high. And make a slide that's exactly that big, and then make all your figures fit perfectly onto that slide, and then they'll look identical throughout your entire report, and your whole report will read way better. And it will save you so much time if you set this up once and then have it nice. By the way, when you want to save it, all you have to do is go File, Save As, and instead of saving a PPTX, a PowerPoint presentation, you can just save a PNG or a JPEG or a TIFF. You can just directly save an image, hit save, yes, whatever, and pick to save that exact slide as a JPEG or an image, and then you've got it as an image and you can paste it into your reports. So that's a really, really useful thing to have set up as a default format. Interestingly, I have a friend who did his PhD a couple of years after me. He asked for a little bit of help around doing some engineering writing and stuff like that, and I told him all this stuff. And literally he says at the end of his thing, by far the greatest piece of advice I ever gave him, everything I tried to teach him was using PowerPoint and setting a default figure size, because he reckons that saved him more hours than everything else. So apparently that's the most useful thing I have to tell anybody. All right, so then we'll get on to transitions. So this is transitioning from one slide to the next slide. I, in all my presentations, just have none. I never use a transition. I'm not a fan of them personally. I don't really have any objections to these types of transitions where one slide just fades into the other, and there are reasons why you might want to set something like this up. Yeah, this is fine. All of these things would be considered fine. What you don't want to do is get into this territory. In your engineering report, this is probably not super acceptable. So, stay out of slides which fold themselves up into paper planes and fly off, or battle music. Yeah, again, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Okay, so Same deal with animations. So now, animations are something that I actually use all the time, and I'm going to try and show you why here, and I'm going to show you what I do with animations. So this is a slide from next week's lecture. So next week, we're going to talk a bit about presentation skills, so hopefully that ties in with this content really, really well. One of the things we're going to talk about presentation skills. And this is one of the slides that will probably change between now and then, but you're going to get a slide that looks something like this. Now, if I put a lecture slide up that looks like this, you'd look at it and go, what the hell is going on? What the hell is that crap? But that's not what you're actually going to see. What you're going to see is a lecture slide that starts out looking like this. And it's going to slowly evolve. Oh, I actually haven't fixed that animation yet. As I said, this is a work in progress. Anyway, it's going to slowly evolve. And I'm going to obviously spend a few minutes and I'm going to talk about each of these points as they appear on the screen till they're finished. And then I'm going to talk about the next one and say, hey, it's really important not to overload your audience with a whole bunch of content all at once by putting up all this text in one big wall of things. Because what this is showing us on the side is that a human being can look at a small number of things, like up to about 4 of them, and process them immediately. Once you go any more than that, and you see about 7, I think is what that would have been, 6, you can't process them immediately anymore, and it just looks like a wall of text. So you definitely don't want to load people with information, but you might want to have dense slides. So the way in which I do that is by having these progressively evolving slides. Now, this is in direct contrast to what other people do. So this is a slide from Apple when they're giving a presentation on their smartwatch. That's it. This in the background, that's their entire slide. It says number 1 smartwatch and nothing else. There's no animations. There's no text basically at all. There's one word. So I like to have these slides that progressively build up, partially because they help me give a 2-hour lecture and I got to remember all of my talking points. It's not necessarily something that you want to load up on. Now, how do you do it though if you wanted to make slides like this? So what we've got here is a whole bunch of things that are animated to come in. So first I make a slide and it's just got everything dumped on it. Then I come up to my animations page and I grab whatever it is that I want to appear. I select it and I hit the appear button. I'm going to select all my things and everything that I want to appear, I'm just going to make appear. In no particular order, I've just gone through and I've mashed the appear button for everything. Then I open the animations page. Hit this drop down here. This was my text box. When I said appear, it made all of my text in here become animated so that it would appear. And what you've got here is anything with a mouse next to it requires me to press a mouse button or hit my clicker in order for it to appear on the screen. And you can say whether you want that to happen or not. Start on click or start with previous. Or start a particular time after previous. So you don't actually have to press anything. You can just have it run out as a timer. Really difficult, really, really highly skilled you need to be at presenting to have things just appear on a timer. You got to have your wording down pat. So I don't use that. I use the clicker. And then you can pull your pictures up and you can make them appear where you want to make them appear as well. The only thing that is a little bit tricky is if you want something to appear and then disappear. If you have your picture and you want it to disappear and you come up here and you hit the disappear button, it actually sort of messes it up. It replaces the appear with a disappear. It's hard to get both in. The way in which you do it is you add animation. You got to hit this button and then you got to select disappear. And then you can make it appear and then you can make it disappear. So basically that's animations. Same as before. You can do things like hit text to bounce into position. Don't. That's super annoying to try to read text that's doing that. So, and same with a whole bunch of these other things. If you know what you're doing, yes, you can make stuff that's really, really nice. But a lot of the time you can also just make something that's pretty horrible for your audience to have to try and read. So use them cautiously. Be aware that just because I may think they're good or bad doesn't mean everybody agrees with me on that topic. Cool. Okay. Slideshow. So we've already actually used some of these buttons a little bit, that we haven't really pointed them out though. So we're in our normal slides at the moment. If I actually want to go into like a presentation mode, a slideshow mode, you come to slideshow and you go from beginning, or you just press F5 and it starts your presentation for you, and you can click through it. You can start from current slide, Shift F5, whatever. Record your slideshow, again, something that I possibly could have been using other than my screen recording software, but yeah, who cares? Other than that, I don't really touch too much in here. I generally just leave it alone. You'll actually see I use this button down here a lot, which is slideshow, which is exactly identical to that button there. It does nothing different, but for some reason I just tend to use the one down the bottom. Wait, no, it does start from current slide, doesn't it? Yeah, sorry, it does exactly the same thing as that button. Review, I use none of these options. I occasionally use comments when I'm reviewing somebody else's presentation, but virtually never. Alright, view. I use none of those buttons, but I don't use this button either, but a lot of people use this notes button. So if I hit notes, what you get is this little window down the bottom here. You can make it bigger if you want to make it bigger. And this is where you can put notes to yourself. So when you go up and you put a presentation in and turn it on a screen, often what you'll find is if you've got two monitors, PowerPoint gives two different presentation styles. One which shows the thing which your audience is meant to see on monitor 2, which is generally a projector. And one shows something for you. And I unfortunately can't replicate this here for you because I've only got one monitor set up. But what it normally shows you is something that actually looks more similar to this. And you can see your slide shrunken down, and you can see these notes to yourself. So you don't actually need to put your talking points on your slides. You can just put pictures on there, and you can see these notes on your secondary monitor that only you can see. So some people really, really like to present in this style. And it can be good because it means you get less text on your slides, and that's generally considered a good thing. I personally tend not to use it because I think of the way in which I set my slides up with my talking points and animations on them. Anyway, the other thing is it can be a little bit risky because you can get caught in a presentation scenario that doesn't have two monitors, or that it's set up in a weird way, and sometimes you lose your notes and they don't display to you, or sometimes you just simply can't see that second monitor. From where I lecture, I can't see the computer monitor, so I don't really get to use those notes. So sometimes they're super useful, sometimes they're not. Use them at your own discretion. Other than that, I don't really use any of these buttons. Don't actually know what most of them do. So maybe they're super useful. Then you got standard help. As always, if you don't know, Google it. Google's great for that. You are not going to be the only person on earth who's ever tried to solve any of the problems that you're going to encounter in PowerPoint. The only thing that I'm going to finish up on then is saving as a PDF. This is something that's to some extent gone out of fashion, but used to be very, very popular. And it still kind of is. So you can save as a PowerPoint presentation, right? Stock, standard, save as PowerPoint. When you save as a PowerPoint, you generally end up with a fairly large file size, and you generally end up with something that requires, well, not generally, you do end up with something that requires PowerPoint on any computer to open it. And that has proven to be problematic in the past, with people not always having the right version of PowerPoint and all sorts of different things. So saving as a PDF is a really common thing to do. So PDF, there we go. And then you would have two versions of your files, one which would be the PowerPoint presentation, one which would be the PDF. And if you just had text on slides, PDFs are supposedly just as easy to read, and you can print them and all sorts of stuff. So that is fairly common practice, and it's a thing that you should consider doing as well. I think it's largely gone out of fashion now, largely due to the fact that internet browsers can open PDFs themselves, so this is rarely an issue anymore. But it is a thing that still exists, and you should know that it's really easy to do. All right, other than that, there's your crash course into PowerPoint. See you guys.